I'm admittedly a little bit late to the party on this, but audiobooks are fast becoming one of my favourite new things. I live about a 25-minute walk from my college, so most days I spend about 50 minutes walking to and from. And it recently occurred to me that one of the best ways for me to read more non-fiction this year would be to start listening to it on audiobook. So I started out this experiment by listening to Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, because I had just heard good things about both the book and also her rendition of it in audio form, and I really enjoy listening to Elizabeth Gilbert. I think I actually enjoy listening to her talking, her interviews and her TED Talk and so on more than I actually enjoyed Eat, Pray, Love, and I was not disappointed. I really loved the book. I don't necessarily agree with her on every count, but in terms of it inspiring me creatively and artistically and inspiring me to actually get going and do the work, it was absolutely invaluable. And I may well talk more about the book at a later stage, but today I just wanted to make a quick Faithfood video to talk about how the book and her ideas about creativity and the process of creation has inspired me spiritually, and how that book has just really tapped me back into the relationship between spirituality and artistic creativity. So one quote in particular kind of stood out to me, and this encapsulates quite a lot of her central argument actually. And she said, "Human beings are possessed of something special, something extra, something unnecessarily rich, something that the novelist Marilyn Robinson calls an overabundance that is magical." And I just think that's such a wonderful way of describing not just creativity but the human condition in general. And that quote right there, that concept right there, really describes how, for me, the creative artistic impulse is absolutely one and the same as the spiritual one. It's this impulse not only to celebrate but to create, to put something back out into the universe, to do something fun and engaging and creative and different with the materials to hand. And specifically, in line with what Elizabeth Gilbert says in this book, something that is entirely useless, something that is not necessary, that we don't need as a society. Now, I'm not sure that I actually agree with her that art is not necessary, that art is not important, and that it's just something that we do and should do for fun, from a place of joy. My problem with this sentiment is twofold. First of all, that art can come from a lot of different places, and it doesn't necessarily always align with the kind of trickster archetype that she describes in this book. It doesn't always align with a light-hearted, joyful coming to your work. Sometimes art arises from something much darker, much more complicated, from something much more urgent, and I think that's okay. And also I think that art is important, but that I could go on about that at some length in another video, and maybe I will. But for the sake of this video today, I just wanted to say that I think that both art and spirituality and all of those other things that we do that arise out of that kind of overabundance that we have as human beings emotionally and intellectually, that is really sacred. There's something really wonderful about that, and I really want to start getting back in touch with the concept that every time I come to an artistic project, every time I express myself in some way that is perhaps superfluous to just my day-to-day living, it's superfluous to my basic needs, every time I do that, every time I try to put something new out into the world in that way, I am directly tapping into the same part of me that sits at my altar and that does ritual, that celebrates the wheel of year, that worships and reveres and, kneels in the face of the awe and wonder that the cosmos inspires in me. Because it's all kind of one and the same thing, because I think that creative impulse is basically the same kind of experience or feeling. I've been wanting for quite some time to start incorporating the creation of visual art more into my spiritual practice, because visual art for me has the potential maybe to be a little bit more free than other forms of creative expression, because I don't have any designs to become a professional artist. And because I feel like it is one of the primary forms of creative expression in which we can maybe most readily put our inner critic to one side and just let it flow. And that's been something that I've been hoping to start doing for quite some time, but of course the inner critic is strong and I haven't quite managed to give myself the space and the time to start doing that. But it's something that strikes me as really having a lot of potential for drawing together all the different aspects of that overflow, of that tendency that we have to create things that are unnecessary, that are just celebratory or kind of in decoration or whatever. So I guess I really just wanted to make this video to encourage you to make space and time for things that don't seem immediately necessary or that aren't necessarily going to change the world or that are maybe superfluous to your wider life goals. Sometimes I think we just need to make space to have a bit of fun or at least freedom of expression. And this can come in just so many different ways, but I think for me, one of the best ways to give myself permission to do these kind of things, you know, to spend an hour just journaling, just writing for something that nobody will ever see, or to create a painting that I'm never going to show to anybody, that is just as a sort of a devotional practice. I think that reminding ourselves that that kind of thing is innately tied in with reverence and spirituality and a spiritual practice is probably the best way to give yourself permission to do those things. But I think this is also a really good way to remind yourself that spiritual expression comes in many different forms and that you don't actually have to be doing any one specific type of religious practice in order to be connecting with that part of you that just wants to express that feeling of overabundance of emotion and experience that we have as humans. Because I really believe that if any kind of religious practice is worth doing, if any kind of religious practice is affecting any kind of change in us or in the world, if any kind of religious practice is connecting us to divinity, then so is creative expression to just the same extent. I really believe that. I think soul-felt, heartfelt, free creative expression is probably the best way to connect to whatever it is that we feel is divine.